sit with a person, even on a Zoom or in person. I have no clue who they really are, but I start talking about how I'm struggling with my father in his last days, weeks, or maybe months if we're lucky. And this person shares their story about their grandfather, and we're bonded. And then later on, I get an email about what they need. I'm like, oh my God, that person is a billionaire CEO from Europe who suddenly is my new friend and coming over to hang out with my kid at our volleyball thing because I built a bond without an agenda. And all I had to do was be comfortable enough in my own work to be able to share that. It makes you less lonely. It makes it more strategic. It's not manipulation. It's literally just a different way of being that if unless you start, you're just going to feel like you can never catch up.
Welcome back to Rise and Tell with Sheekha. I am Sheekha Singh, your host and author. I have got something special to share. My brand new book, Unburnable Ambition, How Overachievers Win Without Burning Out. This book is for all of us who dream big but refuse to let burnout be the price. Head to shikhasingh.com/unburnable ambition and sign up today. Now let's dive into today's episode. Our guest for today is David Homan. I had so much fun talking to David on this episode. David taught me how to be real, how to be authentic, and the importance of building actual connections and taking action on them. David Homan is the CEO and founder of Orchestrated Connecting, a global network of super connectors focused on impact. He's also a published author, a classical composer, a startup founder, and an advisor in impact. He chairs the Arthur Miller Foundation, and his classical music can be heard globally. David is a hoot, and you will know that his experience speaks for itself when you listen to this episode. So there you go, everybody. Today we have with us David Homan. David, welcome to our show. It's a pleasure having you on our show. How are you?
I've had a rough and tumble morning here in New York, but I'm making the most of it because my kid gave me the best hug I've ever gotten to say goodbye today.
Aw,
So that usually makes everything all better.
that's so adorable. That's so nice. I'm sorry that you've had a rough morning, David. I'm just going to just dive right in and we'll start with
Sure.
that rough morning. So, what is it that you do that helps you other than your kid's adorable hug? But what is it that you comes to your mind immediately when you're having a bad morning? What helps you to not lose it?
So there's one thing that helps me more than anything else, obviously besides my children, and that's improvising at my piano. And
Nice.
I've been playing piano since I was 4, composing since I was 12, but most of what I love to do is just sit down, usually in a pretty crappy emotional state, and just play. And I didn't quite realize, and some of this is my musical training, some of it is my theater improv training and the amount I do public speaking, but I can just sit and play something. And for 7 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes 20, it sounds like a fully composed piece somebody else was rehearsing or performing. And it just comes out of me. I mean, I have hundreds of these. And since I came out with my first book a few months ago, I
Yeah.
started that thing called Instagram, and now I post every few days and improv with some of that emotional state for the tens, hundreds, sometimes tens of thousands of people that watch each video.
Awesome. This is so cool. Thank you, David, for sharing that with us. And congratulations on your book. Why don't
Thank you.
you tell us a little bit about the book? I am so intrigued to get into the networking bit of this episode. And yeah, let's just start with the book.
So the book is also about networking, although I actually use the term connecting.
Yes.
Networking has that old adage of like some guy in the 80s, like handing out his business card the minute he meets you. And that is still true to this day. There are people that I meet and instantly they hand their card to me and
Oh,
instantly I
wow.
take their card and I put it in the suit pocket. I won't say which side, which means trash for later, but I've developed a whole system because of the
Nice.
amount of people I meet. So the book is called Orchestrating Connection. It is a book I co-wrote with a very amazing friend, Noah Askin, who's a professor at UC Irvine. And this is his specialty. He's a trained musician. He won't say he's as trained as I am, but he is a musician, business professor, network theorist. And what we based the book on was the 10-year-old private community I've run specifically of people who would now call themselves proudly connectors or super connectors. So everything I've done is study the power of what an individual connector does and needs,
Okay.
building a system around that, and then building a system around what I believe true intentional and purposeful communities need.
Okay.
And they're very similar in terms of the principles and the work, but you have to have both sides
Okay.
in order to make a community that actually functions and works. And I run a global one, which is called Orchestrated Connecting. And that all ties into the world of being a musician and a composer. But when you're a composer, you're making something that everyone else has to follow and play. When
Right.
you're a conductor, everyone has to watch you and stay in sync. When you're an orchestrator, you're just taking the elements around you and you're shaping them together for that moment. The next moment, somebody else will. So it makes it less of an egocentric approach and more of this idea of how you have to have collaboration to have more harmony.
That is interesting. Cannot wait to read the book, David. So you touched about how everyone has this notion in their head and how it's been forever where someone comes in and hands you a card and people still do that now. And that obviously doesn't work because you're going to throw it in the trash any which ways. So what are the top two things in your mind that someone can implement if this is their first time going to a connecting event, a networking event, a conference, or any sort of event where they're hoping to build fruitful connections and relationships that are going to help them in their career?
So the fact that somebody would come in hoping to build that sets them apart than most people, because most people come to get something for themselves out of the event. I'm going to make that sale. I'm going to meet that keynote speaker. I need to get to this. And they think about it as working through people. And that therefore that mentality shift of how do I deepen and build relationships that will really enrich my community and my opportunities, that's a whole different way to look at it. And so the two founding principles of how I connect with anyone are curiosity and vulnerability. And those might seem generic, except for, what I would say to my co-author Noah, I'd be like, I go to like 100 to 200 events a year. And I think on an average, every 10 people I meet, only three ask me a question back when I express curiosity to them. And he
Nice.
called a professor who's written a book on curiosity. The study turned out correct. About 34% of people, when you meet them and you express curiosity, they will ask a question back. The other average seven, they don't ask you a single thing. I mean, maybe like what happened in the elections or what happened in the Rangers game or the Blue Jays and whatever it is, but like nothing of substance. And so what I realized was when I connect with people, I combine that with vulnerability and I share about my day. I share about my dad being in hospice. I share about things that everyone goes, I can't believe you told a stranger that. And what happens is the minute they respond back with empathy and curiosity, they're no longer a stranger. I
Built a
was able in a
connection.
few minutes to assess whether this person could be part of my community, my tribe. And when you put those together with the other lens, which is true diversity, to make that first attempt to go to somebody, not to be to somebody that looks like you, talks like you, is in the same career, even the same environment, the more you add diversity with true trust, you build a massive web of opportunity that people don't see because people try to get to the right person, not knowing the person to the side of them is the person who could have done that.
Wow, I agree 1000%. I am with you on this because I've experienced that myself. And it's such a humbling experience when, you are in that same room, a huge room. You have no idea who's in that room. You're just trying to search, trying to, even if you have that courage where you want to go in, be the first person who's asking a question or trying to build a connection, the other person also has to be that open minded to come to you or to even listen to your question or to acknowledge it in the first place. Because when you've asked the question, you realize that you do not look like others in the room. And I feel like that's such a good thing that you just brought up, David, is just make sure you leave your biases where they are and then start approaching and building those relationships. And I've also learned that in my career, in the IT industry in the last 11 years, because it is such a huge industry and you get thousands of applicants for a job, the person who's going to interview, because they've been in a certain position for quite some time, often tend to select candidates based on, and again, they don't do it intentionally, but somehow it happens that they talk like them, they look like them, they've gone to the same university or they have a similar background. So we as leaders were taught and trained how not to do that. And I have seen a huge difference in the team in the team culture, the company culture, and the performances also. And I see those relationships being built, like you said. People ask questions, and these are the people where you wouldn't have ever imagined that, they would be awesome. They are the ones
Yeah,
who actually start building that trust in the team, and they are the ones that are holding everything together. And it's just so different for you to see that happening, and it's a great learning experience. So I agree 100%. That's so helpful, not just
thank
as
you.
someone who's going to attend the event, but also someone who's looking for, who wants to be a mentor, or who wants to
Mhm.
be, a leader, who wants to help others. I think that point that you just made is so awesome and so useful in today's day and age.
In today's day and age, it's unfortunately more essential, even though,
Yes.
diversity is not a word, especially in the United States right now, we're taught
Yep.
to use. But I would say you look at everything that's been created in this
Yep.
country in the last 50 years and tell me who wasn't an immigrant who built it.
Right.
Tell me what teams that are homogenous, if it's all Indian women in tech or all white men in venture, whatever it might be, tell me where homogeny has created something that we love and consume to this day and age. Or look at what happens when you embrace diversity, but when you do it under those principles of really figuring out the value system of somebody as
Yep.
opposed to the conformity or the homogeny, what you end up with is finding people that are most closer to the thing you cannot see from the surface, which is how they think, how they act in particular, and how they respond when faced with any sort of challenge. The more you've built a relationship, the more you can have an action, a transaction, a confrontation, and work through it. The more we think homogeny creates a way in which the world is stronger. Every homogenous culture that says their way is the highway ends up only benefiting from the diversity that comes around.
What a beautiful thought. Love it. Love it. I love people who answer my questions the non traditional way and like in a different way, which is so refreshing. And I just love that. It's because you get to see it from a different perspective. And for a minute, you're like, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. And it's so awesome. So thank you, David, for being so original.
Sure.
Um,
Well, tell me your next question so I can see if I can stay original for everyone listening.
Of course. All right. So I'm going to touch on the curiosity and the vulnerability part of it. I love it because that's something that I have learned to build upon in the last how many ever years that I've worked in the industry. But I often see a lot of people who are not comfortable right off the bat sharing something personal, even if it's with the coworkers that they've worked for the past 5 years, or with the leaders where they've worked with them for the last X amount of years. They just get, when they are in a certain state of mind, they just want to come get the work done and then go out. But I know, and I've seen this and I've experienced it, it's when you're vulnerable, not just when you're connecting with people, but even in other projects, be it technical, non-technical, that's how relationships start. That's how you become someone's peer, you become someone's friend, you become someone's, confidant. So tell me, David, for people who struggle with sharing things personally, how can they, but they, like, that's not their personality, that's not who they are, that doesn't come easily to them. So what can certain people like that do when they just don't know how to do it, but they want to start connecting with different people and
Yeah.
they want to start building the network?
So forgive me for being crass with this answer, but you said non-traditional. There's a difference of having that verbal diarrhea
Yeah.
or having the quote constipation,
Right.
and neither are good, right? And so I say this because we have to look at the extremes to understand how you come to the middle.
Correct.
You're spending all of your time in a job in this situation
Yep.
getting paid. So your time and your output equals the money that you're making. And then separate from that, you build your relationships, you have your family, you build your community. Except for when you have that narrow mindset and you're not willing to share in any way,
Right.
to take the time to build that trust, you're missing the most profound opportunity, which is the relationships that you're building during that time that you're spending your time and getting paid. Because everyone goes, oh, how did I get that job out of 1,200 other people? Well, my old boss made a call and the person looked at my resume.
Right.
How did I get handpicked for that team within this larger corporation? because somebody I worked with 3 years ago put in a good word because of what I did for them or how they knew me. Everything is relationship driven, and we've divested ourselves from this idea that the relationship is key. Yet I've been studying, this my whole world of connecting is really a study of power. And I've been studying this for 25 years, and all power is relationships. Who has access? Who can get what they need done, and who can stop somebody else from getting access? That's
Yeah.
what deals are. That's what sales are. That's why some mergers work and others don't. It's why when certain people get cut from a job, not just based on the numbers, if they have a strong relationship with the person, they're automatically put to the side. And so it's all relationships, and this is what moves things forward. And therefore, if you don't spend time building that trust through curiosity and vulnerability, then you are putting yourself either on the chopping block or simply not to be remembered. And I found, there's so many people that are so fascinating who think they're going to be judged for what they love, what they do. And obviously, there's extremes I won't get into on a PC podcast. But most people like they're afraid, and my answer would be, okay, so you're afraid. You're afraid that somebody is not going to like what you like, and now
Right.
you don't like them because they judged you for being an amateur yo-yoist.
Yeah.
You have been looking throughout all of the greater Toronto area to find the best gluten-free bread, and you had to go to New York for it, whatever it might be. Somebody else will go, well, my husband's celiac. Where have you found? And suddenly you're in a conversation for something that seems simple, but actually is where you're spending your time and your money. And so we don't see it this way, but it's the only thing that matters because we all had this thing called COVID happen to us. And
Yeah.
we all understood exactly then who actually picked up the phone, who checked in, and who didn't.
Correct.
And the people who thrived were not extroverts. The people who thrived during that world where you couldn't just go out were the people who had built trust, who created a sense of belonging. And they got through COVID much differently than the rest of the world because they developed a skill set of actually wanting to help somebody else, be curious, be open, and not expect an instant result from an interaction.
Yes, makes so much sense when you put it that way because, yes, you're definitely getting so much out of it and you're losing a lot if you're not building those relationships while you're in that job or, while you're on a project or doing anything. I agree. I agree because the best things to me have happened only because of the network that I built. And it's
Yep.
just amazing to see that power. I attended a conference once in New York, actually, and it was all about QA. I'm in the QA world, which is quality assurance. So I test
Hmm.
applications. And so I was in there, and the organizer of the event, she liked my proposal so much that she said, yes, just fly in. And I wasn't a leader back then, and it was a conference for QA leaders. She said, no, you know what, just come here and then just give the talk. I'm very excited about this topic. And that's it. I met her during the event. I gave my talk, spoke to a few other people, added her on LinkedIn, and then cut to I think 2 or 3 years later when I decided to write my book about why we need more women in IT. The first thought that came to my mind was her. She was the organizer of the event, and I reached out to her and I said her name was Anna Reisman. And I said, Anna, would you be open to writing the foreword for my book? And she said, of course, yes, why not? I would love to. And then she wrote the foreword for my first book, and I was so happy. And when I look back, I always think that if I wouldn't have put in the extra effort to go attend a conference, or if I would have been shy, I don't think they would pick up my topic, or who would
Hmm.
even care about my story if I'm sharing something personal or something that happened in my professional life. I don't think she would have agreed, or she would have even known who I was. Forget writing forward for my book. And there's so many instances like that have happened with me, David. And I feel that's true, 100% true, that you lose out on so many opportunities in the future if you're not working on building that trust and being vulnerable and creating those connections today, like right now.
100%. The one thing I'd add is the thing people fail to understand is the amount of work it takes to be ready for those moments.
Yes.
It's what I will scare people with when I speak about my book, when I consult with people in the community I run, I will say, I think you have 4 or 5 moments in your life, maybe six, that if you're lucky, you were ready at the right moment for the right person to make that introduction. And if you're not ready, you're going to miss it. It's not just like you did this at work, and then eventually you get the speaking gig. You have to put a lot of work in. You have to figure out how to say something, how you come across, who you talk to, what the environment is. And the more people that put in this work but don't do the self work of understanding how they come across, what their tone sounds like, what their body language is like, how they walk into a room, how they build trust, because people do it very differently. I in my 20s, even into my 30s, was not a confident person being vulnerable with everything that I am now, but I was that person that everyone would just sit and confide their life to. And I eventually realized that the strength I had was being unapologetic, that was okay, and therefore it was okay for me to do the same. And now I sit with a person, even on a Zoom or in person. I have no clue who they really are, but I start talking about how I'm struggling with my father in his last days, weeks, or maybe months if we're lucky. And this person shares their story about their grandfather, and we're bonded. And then later on, I get an email about what they need. I'm like, oh my God, that person is a billionaire CEO from Europe who suddenly is my new friend and coming over to hang out with my kid at our volleyball thing because I built a bond without an agenda. And all I had to do was be comfortable enough in my own work to be able to share that. It makes you less lonely. It makes it more strategic. It's not manipulation. It's literally just a different way of being that if unless you start, you're just going to feel like you can never catch up.
Correct. I agree. And sorry about your dad, David.
Thank you.
That I cannot imagine what that feels like. I don't think that's easy. And yeah, just sorry
It,
you have to go through
everyone
that.
who is faced or is facing losing a parent, you lose a part of yourself and you don't realize the things that they are to you until you know you can't say them. And it's why, I wrote a post a couple weeks ago and I was like, here's the things I'm learning as I'm going through this journey. And I said, the one thing I have no regrets on is I've spoken to my father every single day. I've told him how I feel, proud of me, and continues to be proud. So whenever he does pass this earth, I will have no regrets of what my life was that he knew. And when I say to other people, are you in that place with your parents? They mostly get choked up and they go, no, but I'm gonna call them soon. And I'm not gonna waste a moment that I was wasting thinking that there'll always be time when we don't have it.
That's so true. And especially people who live far away from their parents and their family, I think that's even more tough. Um, and yeah, I know this again kind of ties back, David, to how, you at this stage, I feel, are setting such a great example to our listeners and viewers right now, David, because you put this so beautifully and you showed what you're going through, what you're feeling, and how it has affected you despite being an author, despite all your titles. And I feel that's what most people lack in today's day and age. We have
Yeah. So
forgotten how to be real.
So here's what I'd say. I actually just disagree because I think everyone's real. I think
Okay.
they're real with themselves every single day when they wake up wanting more than they have, when they need more than they can get. And we have these two narratives, right? And
Right.
I do this a lot as an exercise for myself and when I run events. So my positive, right? Top like level journey, right? I'm a best-selling author launching a startup, nearly having raised $1 million. I run a global community, which includes celebrities and billionaires and all these people. I've run a successful business for 5 years after working with none other than Ray Dalio and his family. I'm an award-winning composer with 7 albums. I have two beautiful children and a great, incredible partnership, and I have an amazing home, and I have all these things. And I woke up at 3 a.m. today having terrors. I cannot get to all of my work. I feel like my business is going to fail. I'm worried if my startup doesn't get off the ground in the right way in the next 2 months as planned, somebody else will take that spot. Everyone thinks the allure of becoming an author, as you know, means there's so much that happens from it. And the real truth is, okay, you wrote a book. What's next?
Yeah. True.
And all of these things that you can see in one lens, I think everyone is living with the reality of what actually haunts them, which is that we just constantly need to have stability and health and growth, and that balance is like standing on a seesaw. And like you can try to get it level, but at some point you can't.
Right.
And so when you embrace that truth that all those things are real, as all my successes are real, the vulnerability and the trust that comes from sharing not both sides, but the reality of one with the other creates a level that doesn't have that sort of caste system, that hierarchy of, well, this person, because they're richer or more attractive or exited founder or have a massive podcast. And I like that inferiority comes from thinking people see that other narrative, and the strength comes from sharing that negative, and somebody you idolize go, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
My business fell apart 3 years ago when my dad passed away. I nearly lost everything. I couldn't function for 18 months and I had to fake it so much that faking it made me inauthentic. And then a light bulb clicked because I realized my dad wouldn't want me to be that way. That's what somebody said to me yesterday. And like somebody I idolize, the world actually idolizes. And I'm like, really? Like that happened to you? Okay, then I can fall apart and push through at the same time.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to share that because what do I have to lose? It's the truth. They're both the truth.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, I think that makes sense when you like marry it with the other perspective that you have of you on in your head. So okay, I'm yeah, I can agree to that part. But I also see, David, that a lot of people hide. And that's again because of different reasons. It could be because I know you deal with a lot of millionaires, billionaires, and a lot of successful people. But also when you look at people around you, when you go to a bar, when you go to a restaurant, there it might be because of past experiences or past trauma or whatever. Certain people try to hold that wall. So that's what I meant when I said they're not real, because I've seen that also, like people who've had 30 plus years of experience or 25 plus years of experience will have this wall in front of them when they're talking to a group of people, and they hardly show their weaknesses. And I don't know why that is. I know that's changing today,
So
but yeah.
in a group, yes,
Okay.
because groups don't interact. People interact one to one, maybe
Yeah.
three in a group. You can't really have more than that. Like in music, like every beat, like take like Indian classical music. It's one of the only types of music that can have beats that are like 13 or 27 but it's all structured in twos and threes. Human interaction is the exact same. That is the maximum you can do. So you could never
Got it.
judge that in terms of how the group is. You have to judge it if you get that one-on-one. And the thing is, yeah, like people hide. Everyone hides. I hide a lot because we live in a world, and I'm a white man. It's easier for me to say I own my truth than an Indian woman. But when you have your purpose and you're figuring out your why, and you have worked on being truly empathetic and curious and vulnerable, everyone around you who makes you feel judged for that, like honestly, thank God. Like the number of people that I've told in the last month that I have to reschedule my call because of my dad, some of them showed their cards. Like one guy like asked if I could talk the next day. And I was like, no, I'll be in touch when I'm ready. And I just pressed delete because he showed me that the
Ooh.
opportunity he wanted from me had no care in the world for what I'm currently dealing with. And somebody else I canceled, and they've checked in every 3 days to say, here's what I would have needed when I lost my mother. Um, have you said this to yourself today? I don't know this person yet. I was introduced. They set up a call. I canceled it because of my dad. In 3 weeks now, I have this beautiful new friendship with somebody I've never talked to and never met because of how they showed up. So, my world, thank God when somebody hides something or makes you feel judged, it is a perfect lens to go, who's next?
Yeah.
I don't need you if that's how you're going to treat me.
Yes, exactly. Wow. I've enjoyed this conversation so far, David. You've brought in your perspective from a completely different lens, and it's really very refreshing and a learning thing too, because I've learned a thing or two today after talking to you, David, especially about connecting. So I'm really curious to know, first of all, what made you build Orchestrated Connecting? And second, what was your biggest challenge?
So the quick version, knowing we got a little bit of time, right? The quick version was I spent 5 years not knowing what I built. I got
Oh.
out of my network, which was specifically arts philanthropy, and I went into the worlds of climate change and mental health and investing in women and social justice and refugees and all these things that were impactful because I care about doing something good as opposed to just profiting from it. And everywhere I went, I met that person now we would call the connector, and I built an insane network of them. And then they'd keep calling me up, asking me for connections they couldn't make for themselves. And I eventually be like, well, why don't you talk to Jonathan? He was at my birthday party with you. You sang karaoke. They'd be like, Jonathan's an investor in fintech and crypto. I'd be like, right, the relationship is with me to you,
Right.
not you to each other. So the whole goal was let me do an event, see what happens in a very specific way, That's what the book is about too, of how to get people together, what to say, what not to say, a whole rule system I call my mantra. And from one event now, I'm over 185
Wow.
with a global network of 2,300 people in 187 cities and 35 countries, all who have that same mindset. I built it to solve a problem, which was to make my network more efficient. It's obviously not if I deal with thousands of people and hundreds of calls every month and quarter. But I found my purpose in it, which was to support the people supporting others and name and say what should have been said all along. And it's like when I say to other people, yeah, that person was a total dick about my dad dying, they're like, oh my God, I remember when I was experiencing this with my kid, and that person kept pushing me to take a call. And I'd say, then be done with them. And they'd think about it and they'd go, yeah, why not? We should live in a world where we encourage the positivity, we celebrate actions of generosity with gratitude. And everyone who doesn't act that way, right? Your act of asking your now friend to do the forward to your book, that was an act of generosity, an expression of gratitude. And from something that she did to help launch your career, she got the forward of a book from it, not the action she thought would happen from it, but a positive result from just that thing of believing in you, you having the courage to say it, and her having the courage to champion you. And we don't express that enough. We
Right.
just focus on the negative, what we don't have. I celebrate every day something somebody's done for somebody else in my community. And then everyone puts a lens on them and goes, well, if they helped Donna, how can I help the person who helped her?
Nice. Wow. This is amazing. That's awesome, David. Seriously, hats off. Because I've seen it is difficult. If you're new to a certain community, but you have all these dreams and you know you are confident about your goal, you know you want to build something, you want to get something out into the world, but you lack connections. I can see how orchestrated connecting would be so helpful, and the events that you have would be super, super helpful to build those connections and actually maintain them through you. So this is just awesome. Before we end the show, I want to ask you, is there anything that you would like to share with our audience? Any thoughts, suggestions, tips, David?
I like to go very practical, because somebody could listen to this and be like, all right, well, like, I really like that guy. Maybe I'll buy his book. Maybe I'll listen to another podcast of yours. And in the end, the thing that people lack is something practical to do. So you took an action for your now friend to get the forward for your book. That was an action you took from her generosity. So I would say for everyone listening, pick one person in your life who's helped you get somewhere further in it and call them up and say thank you. Don't make any ask except for what they need now. If we just took that as a step, everyone would feel a little bit better who's contacting somebody else, and those people would feel supported at a moment where probably no one else is asking them what they need. And if you can't help them, that's fine. If somebody asked me to find her dog one day, I was like, I don't know how to do that. Like, I think you live in like Albuquerque, but like, I was like, I checked in a week later. I was like, did you find your dog? And she's like, we did actually. Thank you. And then she called me up a month later. She's like, I need you to meet my friend. And I was like, who's your friend? And she's like, he owns the, and it was a very prominent person, but it's
Wow.
because even if I couldn't help, I expressed the graciousness of being there with her through it. So that's what I would leave people with. There's a whole bunch of practical tips in every chapter of my book. It is a playbook, not just a manifesto. Mostly that because my co-author Noah took my manifesto and turned it into something brilliant, which was like the Malcolm Gladwell type of data and the science and the tone that made everything that everyone could hear me saying well. When you read it, it sounds a little too preachy. But I believe in this because I've seen it work for 10 years. And I've seen it work for the people who are the best in the business doing this. And they go, oh, you said the things I never said. Now I'm going to conform to the way you do it. And I got better results from it. Plus, I have more time and I'm less lonely and I have more support than I had before. So I would just say, why not? There's 1,000 ways to act, but very few people name their truth and then help others with it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, David. Really appreciate it. I am pretty sure not just this practical tip, but we've gotten so much more out of this conversation. So thank you for taking out time from your schedule and for being a guest on our show, David. It's
It's
been
such a
a
pleasure.
hoot. Awesome. Thank you, David. Thank you for tuning in for today's episode of Rise and Tell with Sheekha. My book, Unburnable Ambition, is all about how to chase your biggest goals without losing yourself to burnout. You can now sign up at shikasing.com/unburnable ambition. Until next time, keep growing, keep glowing, and be yourself, and keep your ambition unburnable. Thank you.